thanks for staying tuned. It's still the conversation here on Lagos Television. Sometime last week, the NERC, that is the body saddled with the responsibility of overseeing the functions or the responsibilities of power generation and distribution in the country, came up with the resolution that it had at that point in time approved for the hike or yes, an increment in the distribution of electricity in Nigeria from 66 naira to 225 naira for Band A customers. According to the NERC, just about 15% of consumers in the Band A, of course, form the numbers of those in that band in Nigeria. But the question on the lips of Nigerians is, how do you even begin to quantify those under the 15% that the NRC has earmarked? And also, how do you justify whether or not you get up to 20 hours of electricity supply in a day? Be that as it may, is this also coming at a right time where a lot of Nigerians are asking for the basic things of life to be given to them by government? That is what we intend to take a look at on the program today. And joining the conversation is a man of many parties, an accountant, is an engineer, is also a public affairs analyst, as well as a social commentator. Thank you this morning, and thank you for joining us this morning, Mr. Bala Zakka.
Thank you. On the program. And I greet our viewers across the globe. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Zakka, let's start this way. According to the Vice President of the NERC, Musili Oseni, he did say that part of the reasons why NERC approved this new hike would be for the discos to be able to pay for gas, to be able to maintain their machines, as well as ensure that there is electricity supply for up to 20 hours for those in Band A. For you as an individual, do you think, of course, these are enough reasons why the increment is justifiable?
No, the reasons are not justified. Whichever angle or quadrant you look at it, the reasons are not justified. Okay. It's just very unfortunate that in the context of Nigeria, when it comes to those I technically classify as our leaders, we are always getting certain things or so many things about our economic stability and economic growth wrong. Let me define leaders in this context. Leaders are those that fellow citizens like you and I and others decided and collectively handed over our economic, political, and social destinies into their care or into their trust in national interest. And to that extent, if things are not going right, we need to come out and say it in national interest. Okay. I tried analyzing everything surrounding all the variables that were presented to us as Nigerians to justify the increase in tariff. And I noticed, the leaders, you could call them government, you could call them advisors, you could call them technocrats, they were not correct. I analyzed it from an engineering perspective. The leaders were not right. I looked at it from an accounting perspective. Our leaders were not correct. I looked at it from a task perspective. From as a public affairs analyst, our leaders are not correct. And I can tell you, as we speak right now, the Nigerian economy is not in green. Everybody knows that. The Nigerian economy is not even in amber. The Nigerian economy is actually in red. Okay. The only thing is it has not reached what we technically call crimson. So anybody that will tell you that there is a need to further cause the further laying down and prostrate nature of our Nigerian economy to the level it has gotten, that person may not be right. Okay. These things are practicals. We could see them. We could see things that are happening to all the sectors. Whether you talked about the strategic industrial sectors, the strategic domestic sectors, and the strategic commercial sectors, the indices are not looking right.
So the timing is wrong.
The timing is wrong. The concept is also wrong.
So what do you think government should have done
government was never, ever supposed to have removed that little oxygen, that we require, I will define subsidy, that we technically call subsidy.
Okay.
And let me define subsidy in this context. Subsidy is a globally or a universally accepted economic pain cushioning concept.
Okay.
It is to cushion or reduce pain, and it is a global concept. So in the context of Nigeria, if subsidy is not working, that will never in any way invalidate the global definition or relevance of subsidy. What you rather will need to look at is to look at why subsidy is not working in your claim, and do something about it. A practical example is this. Like in the case of refined petroleum products, as far as people like me were concerned, yes, we had the government here releasing subsidy. The subsidy is supposed to come from the government or leaders to the citizens.
Right.
But unfortunately, in between the leaders and the citizens, you have what we call saboteurs.
Right.
What
so
you were supposed to technically remove should have been the saboteurs and not the subsidy.
Right.
And we could see the consequence.
Okay.
You don't need anybody to tell you that the Nigerian economy is prostrate today. You don't need anybody to tell you that industrialists and domestics and other service providers and service consumers are groaning in pains. And I will give you elementary examples.
Mrs. Zakka, before you go on, let's quickly also stay with one of the other reasons why NERC said this was also needful, especially at this particular point in time. The discos are business men and women. And of course, according to NERC, they also needed to recoup part of the capital invested for the operation cost, as well as having a return for the investment they have made. So for all the years that they've been operating in Nigeria, would it be safe to say that they haven't recouped their investment? Or now that this 66 naira to 225 naira, will that investment or that profit be made in just a year or months that this new tariff will take effect?
You see, there is something also that is very confusing, but it's supposed to be very simple, but it's very confusing when it comes to the context of Nigeria. There is something I want to make very clear. Whether people accept it or not, the provision of goods and services is supposed to be the responsibility of government. I felt very disappointed when I noticed that Nigerians have been so bullheaded to the point where there are so many responsibilities of the government that many Nigerians don't know. I was involved in a discussion where I said, ordinarily, let's start from the basics. We don't have drinking water. And somebody said, no, why are you talking about drinking water? Government is concentrating on more complex things to provide. Then I said, so are you telling me that people like Lateef Jakonde that provided water were fools? Are you telling me that people like Sam Mbakwe that provided water and saw the need for provision of water were fools? Is anybody telling me that late Bala Musa and the rest were fools, knowing that water constitutes probably more than 50% of the human system? So when you look at it from that angle, you will know that government, unfortunately in this context, has abdicated its duties. And let me give you practical examples. Whenever we talk about public sector and private sector, they are two different things. Public sector is supposed to operate in the interest of the country and citizens. Private sectors or private corporations or private entities are after profit maximization and cost minimization.
Is that what is playing out now?
It is what is playing out, and that's what I keep telling people. If somebody goes to your village today and puts a processing factory and puts an industry or hospital, I can tell you that person didn't go to put that because he or she loves your community.
Mr. Bala,
let me answer this question clearly.
Okay.
That person puts that because from their feasibility studies, it is in that your area that they are going to maximize profit. and exploit enough. So if in the process they provide jobs, they are not providing the jobs because they love your people. But when you're talking about the context of government, whether you have mad people in that community, whether you have prostitutes, whether you have good people or idiots, government must go there and construct roads. Government must provide hospitals, and that is why we try to explain sometimes. People should not be wooed by the approach of private sectors. It's profit maximization. It's only government that will provide goods and services selflessly in the interest of their citizens and our economic growth.
Okay, I do agree with you that as we are presently, the economy of the country is bleeding badly.
Correct.
And my question will be, what impact do you think this is going to have on the manufacturing industry and their cost of production, knowing full well that the cost of production as we speak presently is even forcing so many businessmen and women out of their businesses?
People may not believe it. Diaspora remittances are shrinking by the day. Multinational corporations and local investors, meaning Nigerians, are exiting Nigeria, whether you accept it or not. Let me give you a practical example with the oil and gas industry. There was a company, an institutional company, that has been operating in Nigeria and is still in Nigeria. Last year, quote me that I said so, last year that company didn't drill up to 6 wells in Nigeria. But that same last year, that company moved to East Africa. The country is still operating. The company is still operating in Nigeria, but in a skeletal manner. That company is going to drill 450 wells across 5 years. Meaning that company is pledging to drill about 90 wells in a year. Quote me that I say so. Or go and check it online and see. That will tell you the extent to which Nigeria's economy is being eroded. And I want to tell you something, because I'm a practitioner in the industry. Every day, these multinationals are complaining about lack of diesel. Because when you go, everything they operate, whether they are offices, whether they are trucks, whether they are vessels, are running on diesel. At the present cost of diesel, because we're yet to come to electricity. Tell me how they are going to break even. But let us come down home. Look at a typical hospitality business, maybe a hotel. You will agree with me, if you go to a hotel that has probably 200 rooms, whether they have just 20 guests, they will be forced to run the diesel generator all through the night. How do you expect them to break even? Let's go to the health sector. If you go to a typical hospital, whether it's public or private hospital, and that hospital is supposed to take care or house or bed, say 100 patients. Do you know at night whether they have 5 patients? That hospital must run generator diesel throughout the night. Let's be practical. How do you expect them to break even? Let's go to like the lower level. Take a vulcanizer, for instance. If a vulcanizer buys 10 liters of petrol at, let's just say 600, that's 6,000. Tell me how many tires that vulcanizer, let me use a Nigerian parlance, will vulcanize to get his 6,000. Go to the barbing salon. That woman that will go and buy 10 liters of petrol at like 6,000 naira, how many hairs is he going, or heads is she going to work on? So look at that.
Tariff.
So what we are saying is
it's going to have ripple effect.
Seriously, what we're trying to say is you can see the graduation and the chronology of how somehow, somewhere, Nigerians, everything about Nigeria and the economy of Nigerians was being eroded. And some of us were saying, government, halt it. Government, you are pushing the economy into the evil forest, and Nigerians will not survive it, and we just walk up because you remove subsidy on kerosene, you remove subsidy on diesel, you remove subsidy on petrol. The only thing people were hoping on was going to be electricity from the national grid. That is not available. Then now what you did was you decided to switch off the button. The only thing that you've not been able to track and tax or manipulate to deal with Nigerians is oxygen. And it's just because you don't have control over oxygen. We talk about it because we are Nigerians, and we are talking as families, because we are brothers of commissioners, councillors, president, and the rest. So what we are talking is we're just telling those that the Almighty has ordained, and we handed over our economic, political, and social destinies into their care, that the economy is hurting.
Okay, let me just play the devil's advocate here and look at perhaps a bright side of this initiative and look at it from this angle. So for the customers in Band A, which are mostly business owners, wouldn't it also be of advantage that they're getting up to 20 hours of a power supply in a day and paying 225 naira per kilowatt, rather than spending that money to buy petrol or diesel or other forms of electricity, source of power, rather than depending on electricity?
It's not correct. It's not correct. You're talking to somebody who is a practicing petroleum engineer.
So that's why I want you to...
You're talking to a chartered accountant, and you're talking to a chartered tax analyst. But most importantly, you're talking to a public affairs analyst. It's not correct.
Break it down.
The reason why I'm telling you is this. Energy security is something that should be like oxygen.
So if you have 20 hours of power supply, isn't that electricity, isn't that energy security?
You're getting it wrong. It will be transferred to the consumer. That's what's going to happen. You see, there are certain things that you cannot ration. You're not supposed to ration it, because you cannot decide who will be where. I remember when they wanted to remove subsidy on petrol and diesel, they said the reason why they needed it is because there are some Nigerians that have 20 cars, 50 cars, and I told them, most of these people you call big men, if you make the price of diesel or petrol expensive and they fired all the drivers, will government give them jobs? The answer is no. As we speak again, they came up with some lies. I'm sorry I'm using the word lies, but it's true also. They came up with incorrect information that so many Nigerians will be sitting down and watching the telly. Everybody knew it was lies. People, they came that it was smuggling and the rest. Wait. Electricity is supposed to be like oxygen. If you don't have enough electricity, the hospital wouldn't function.
So should it be free? Should it be free?
No, what we are saying is subsidy. I've defined subsidy. What you need to do is this. If you find corporate citizens, in this case companies, that are coming and trying to hurt your economy, government needs to come in.
But Abimbola said they are businessmen. They have invested their money.
No, but that's why we are telling you what they are after is profit maximization. The intervention can only come from
not in business to make profits?
So if you're making profit, shouldn't you also have something to part with?
The thing is this: when you say you are taking something to part with, this is where government comes in. The government is, you will ask yourself, that's why these are my citizens, their destinies are in my hand. The question...
NERC is a government establishment, it is a regulator.
That's why I'm telling you, unfortunately, let me say it to everybody who cares to listen. Unfortunately, I've discovered that, which is very, very unfortunate. Government also is very good in recruitment of negative propaganda machines. Because at the end, you will see the effect. When this government came in, it was very clear. They said the treasury or the accounts or the systems were emptied. But we knew that some years back, their predecessors came up with those who are very good in propaganda, but they were negative propagandas. They were trying to justify why Nigerians will be exploited. The question is, let us ask ourselves, is the Nigerian economy growing? The answer is no.
Mr. Bala.
Is the Nigerian economy static? The answer is no. So whether it is the private sector or it is Mr. Bala or it is Mrs. Abimbola that you notice will cause pains and economic cancer to your economy and to your citizens, get rid of that person.
Mr. Bala, there's no pain without gain. And if indeed we want to enjoy constant power supply as Nigerians, shouldn't we be willing to pay more?
The question is just
because
like...
even in Freetown, there's no free lunch.
The question is just like when you said, when we remove subsidy in bloody diesel, Nigerians will be doing better. Before the removal of subsidy in diesel, a litre was 87 Nigerian naira. Today, a litre is 1,200 Nigerian naira. Show me the gains. Some people said, when you do these things, investors will come in. I stand to be challenged from the least person to the level of OPEC. Show me one investor that has come to Nigeria. You see, when you talk as a family, you tell yourself the truth. One thing about leaders is leaders will always come from amongst us.
Okay.
We will tell leaders our mind. It is our duty also, even with what is happening, to pray for our leaders, but tell them the truth and criticize them constructively.
Okay.
Anybody that tells you that what is happening is for the benefit of Nigeria, like I tell you, the economy is cancerous.
Right.
The only thing is it is benign, it is not yet malignant.
Okay.
And if we don't halt it, the Nigerian economy will end up in a malignant state and in the evil forest.
Okay.
But we pray that God will give our leaders the enabling wisdom to halt it. But don't allow it to collapse beyond this.
Mr. Zakka, we've talked about, some of the problems here. And so if we've talked about problems, if we have identified some of those problems, it would be also nice to look at a few solutions here.
Correct.
And so one of the solutions which a lot of people have also looked at will be one of the things that Mr. President signed into law, and that is the Electricity Act, to ensure that one of the components of that act is done here, and that is the decentralization of transmission of power. Do you also see that as a panacea or as one that will perhaps give this some kind of reprieve for power generation and transmission in Nigeria?
See, one thing that we always say is this: as far as I'm concerned, no leader has monopoly of knowledge.
Right.
And that's why I said, no matter how visionary a leader is, if he or she, I want to take care of the gender.
That's fine.
Before you get me
into trouble.
No matter how he or she has that vision, if they are not surrounded by supportive lieutenants, they are going to collapse. You saw the predecessors of this president, our current president. You saw how they were misled. The Nigerian economy became cancerous. And there was something I said about, because they are technically removing subsidy. And there was something I said, they said, if you remove subsidy, you are going to come up with palliatives. And I said, we are managing ourselves. What is the benefit of you creating a wound in somebody, right, and you say you will provide subsidy or palliatives? What if those wounds become cancerous? And people say, no, we can take care of it. We saw it. And you can see it. Anybody who tells you that removal of subsidy in electricity is good for Nigeria, that person is not talking in the interest of Nigeria. So and when we're talking about the act, let me tell you something about this act. Look. Laws are made by men.
Right.
Laws are made by men and can be adjusted by men. Quote me till today, I knew the people that started the petroleum industry bill. Even the person who conceived it, late Emmanuel Eboga, and the other person who came and presented it to the Senate, Senator Lee Miba. If Senator Lee Miba is watching, he will tell you, I knew him in our 20s. When they presented that, before we knew, it was hijacked.
Okay.
They said the act will come with these acts, whether you call them acts or whatever, they can be reviewed.
Okay. Mr. Bala, so are you calling for a reversal of these particular increments in tariff or what? And if you are to meet with Mr. President or probably the Honorable Minister of Power, what do you think they should do at this point in time so that they will not drive investors away?
Thank you for that. If I'm before Mr. President, in my presentation slides, some of the points I will tell him is this: Mr. President, your economy or our economy is in pains.
Okay.
Strategic domestic sectors, strategic commercial sectors, and strategic industrial sectors are groaning. And the only reason is because there is no energy. The energy could have come from fossil fuel, but this time we are talking in the context of electricity. What is happening is this: individual and corporate citizens cannot break even. When they get to what we technically call the baseline, there are no profits. And at this rate, the next thing that is going to happen is they will be forced to shut down. And if they shut down, Mr. President, then the country will be thrown into some level of social anarchy and disorder. And it will not be good for you, Mr. President. And then, Mr. President, all those that will be hanging around you in the name of technical technocrats, in this context, Mr. President, they are probably praise singers. Get rid of them and get the economy on the right track, because the Nigerian economy, Mr. President, as I speak to you now, is heading towards the cliff edge. And if something is not done about energy security, the Nigerian economy will collapse into the valley.
Okay, so, I mean, you've looked into, assuming that those were the slides, of course, you were to present
some of the points on the slides.
You were going to present to Mr. President. Again, you mentioned the facts, because I'm still going to go back to that question I asked you earlier, because you didn't quite answer that question.
Which was that?
Which, talking about the decentralization of transmission. Would you then allow states, because now the states should have the powers to generate and transmit power by themselves, and so if there's strict competition in the sector, will this also be one of the gains of the Electricity Act? By so doing, you're creating competition amongst providers. So will that be one thing that states should begin to take the bull by the horn into and find meaningful ways by which the citizens can have more power supply?
Thank you, and may God, like I said, I'm a general person, but we are Africans, and we talk about, may God bless you for that question. You know, everything you're talking about comes under policies. But let me define policies. You know, you have policies at home, you have policies at corporate levels, and you have policies at national level.
Right.
Policies in the context of a nation. Policies are statements that are supposed to define the national philosophy of a country, and the effect must be seen to be reflected in the political thinking of leaders. And in that context now, if the policy to decentralize is going to be in the national interest of Nigeria, why not? Go for it, Mr. President. If the policy is to make sure you reverse this, and you will see Nigerians smiling, and Nigerians will stop disturbing government, and you will stop seeing those we technically call agberos on the disturbing people. Reverse it, and let us say something that is very practical. Many of us have discovered that Nigerians are truly not depending on government jobs. Nigerians are trying to be creative.
Okay.
The vulcanizer is trying to be creative. The hairdresser is trying to be creative. That person running the saloon, or that person running the computer center, or that person that is a blogger is trying to be creative. But if there is no energy, it's a question of time. Everything collapses. You go to houses now, they can't pump water. You go to hospitals now, they cannot carry out activities. You go to schools, labs are not operating. You go to houses, things are getting bad in the fridge and whatever. So it's very clear. And the only thing we need to do is, in the interest of the country, anything that government needs to reverse should be reversed. And that was why at some points, when we were having some rascals that were destabilizing our country, we got to a time when government said, these guys cannot only be called kidnappers, let us tag them terrorists.
Mr. Bala,
and apply that concept and deal with them. So if people are trying to make sure they pollute, or they try to toxify the government of Nigeria, and the Nigerian citizens will be those that will go in for it in national interest, whether you call it act, whether you call it policies. The government of our country should come up with policies to reverse the direction, so that at least Nigerians will smile and breathe.
Okay, you have just identified how pivotal regular power supply is to our economic growth. So if we are going to be on the right path for this economic growth, which way should we follow?
Okay.
Because we have seen that government cannot provide constant electricity supply. That was why investors were invited to come and invest into the economy of the country. But now we are complaining that, okay, they are not supplying us the energy that we need, but they expect us to pay more. So which way should government go, and which way should those investors go?
The answer is simple, very elementary and straightforward. Any organized government that wants to bring in private sectors into its system must first of all demonstrate that government itself can do that thing. Because if you're bringing in private sector because you are a failure, they are already coming with that conception or that feeling in them that it is because you are a failure. So you have no respect. But let us be very practical, because I like being as elementary as possible. Like you said, I'm a public affairs analyst. What sense does it make that a country of about 200 million citizens will be relying on less than 10,000 megawatts of electricity? This is basic element. Does it even make sense to the government? Does it make sense to anybody? Then you are telling me that you are telling somebody who is after profit maximization to come in because somehow, somewhere you are incapacitated, and you think the person will respect you. For anything that government wants to cede to the public, government must first demonstrate that it can work. The reason why you actually bring in citizens is because government wants to further empower citizens, and they can say, okay, take care of health sector, take care of education sector, take care of communication sector, take care of power sector. Government doesn't, in organized clients, government does not do that so that you can come and economically emasculate, asphyxiate, and choke its citizens.
Right.
That is something people need to get clear. Government will prove to you that, yes, we want you to come into education, but it's because we can also run education. Anybody you invite to come in as an investor because you are a failure will never respect you.
Okay, as we close this conversation in a bit, let's also, part of what we'll be closing on this morning will be, you mentioned something very germane here, and that is the number of kilowatts that the country currently generates. We're
Correct.
hovering less than 5,000. We're still hovering around that, and it keeps dropping. The grid keeps collapsing day and night. And so for you, what should be more paramount now for the minister in charge of that sector as to improving power generation in Nigeria?
Well, all I will just tell you, the minister, your options are very few, because citizens cannot run back to petrol. Your citizens cannot run back to diesel. We cannot run back to aviation fuel. We cannot run back to kerosene. So in national interest, this time around, make sure your citizens breathe. Because once you take this away from them, they are going to be choked. And once they are choked, once the level of insecurity gets high, before you know, you will create social anarchy, Mr. Minister. And once you create social anarchy, the next thing that is going to happen is there will be lawlessness. So the first thing we need to do is, let us also see it that we are talking about national energy security here. We're not talking about something that will cheat anybody. We're talking about national energy security that will be good for individuals and corporate citizens. Okay. And that is the only way. We also, Mr. Minister, you know it, all of us know it. We are not relying on government to give us jobs. But if I have a computer and I'm operating, allow me to have some energy to run. If I'm running a barbing salon, please help me. If I am running a recharge card center and I need to charge POS machine, please allow me to breathe. Okay. That's all we are saying. But at the end of the day, it is also our duty as your citizens or fellow citizens who are behind you to keep praying for you. But please, Mr. Minister, if we feel you are doing what is not in national interest, we will criticize you constructively.
Yeah, I particularly like the fact that you ended that we can criticize you constructively, and so criticizing one constructively does not mean you hate an individual.
No, no.
It just means you want the person to be better on their jobs. Bala, would that be all from you?
Well, that would be all, except that I wanted Mr. Bala to rate the Honorable Minister for Power so far, his performance, and of course, do you think things would have been better if all households have been metered in the country?
Well, definitely. You know, one thing again about accountability, when you talk about accountability, even the subsidy, there is a need for accountability because it helps you to track. We need to do that. But one thing I say again, when you see people like Minister and his likes, and some of the people I see in the current cabinet, I see demonstration of competence. You know, you see vibrancy and competence. But like I said, competence will only create opportunities for you. Integrity and professional accountability will earn you the respect. So for me, Mr. Minister, you look vibrant, you demonstrate all the attributes of a competent person, but please, we are waiting for that professional integrity. And professional integrity in this context means whether we Nigerians are watching or not, do the right thing, not what is good. Because something may be good, but it's not right. But anything that is right, even if people do not see the goodness today, they will see the goodness tomorrow.
Some have also complained that the timing is wrong.
That one is already part of the basket. The timing is wrong. It is ill-timed. The way they were talking about the ban, you know, the way we are in Nigeria, we mix. Go to Banana Island, you are going to see Okada riders. You are going to see Malams and Megat. So who said there is a difference?
Will there ever be a good time for this?
That is why we are saying the entire concept and approach of removal of subsidy in the context of an emerging economy like Nigeria, with so many poor citizens, with a very weak currency, with high degree of illiteracy, with high degree of insecurity, is wrong. Okay. The entire concept is not correct.
Okay.
It should be reversed.
All right, we would have to leave this conversation here this morning. Thank you so much, Mr. Bala Zakka, chartered accountant, social commentator, for finding time to be here on the program with us. We appreciate your thoughts on the program.
Thank you, and once again, I greet our listeners across the globe.
All right, that's where we'll leave it this morning. Thank you so much for watching the conversation this segment.